Okay, so welcome to our webinar on the new OINP program. This one, the name is called the InDemand Skills Pilot Program, and it's really for farm workers and construction workers who don't belong to the high-skilled program. They belong to the low-skilled program. This is a really exciting program because it's for the first time in Ontario, they are actually allowing workers who fall under what the government calls low-skilled occupations to actually immigrate. So I'm really excited to speak with you on this topic. Before I do, though, I do want to introduce you to my colleague Zia. Zia, are you there?
I'm here.
Hi, Zia.
Hi, Liz. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
So Zia is going to be there. She's going to be answering the question and answers that you can pose throughout this webinar. At the end, Zia will be asking some of the most popular questions that you've been asking as well, and we can address that at the end of the seminar. Okay, thanks, Zia.
No problem.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is to share my screen right now with you, and I'm going to go through my slides. So today, we're going to be talking about the OINP, and it's really directed towards farm workers in Ontario and the low-skilled construction positions as well. Before I do so, I just wanted to highlight how to ask questions if you have any questions. So this is just a screenshot of my screen, and it should be something that's similar to what you have. There's a question and answer button right here. If you have any questions, you can click on that, and Zia will be there to answer any questions that you might have. Okay? Okay, so first of all, what is the OINP? Well, the OINP is the Ontario Provincial Nominee Program. What is a provincial nominee program? A provincial normally immigration is federal jurisdiction, belongs to the federal government. But the federal government has made some agreements with each province to allow them to select certain people who they want to immigrate, and so the province themselves gets to create their programs. So Ontario now, this is the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, has a few categories. And today, what we're going to talk about is this new category, which is an employer-based category called the InDemand Skills Pilot Program. Okay, so there's a lot of other programs. There's a skilled workers program, international students with this job offer. These are the older programs that are still in place, that are employer-based, and there's a whole bunch of other programs as well that are all OINP programs. We have done some webinars before on these other programs, so feel free to go on our website at lmlawgroup.com if you wanted to view some of these other videos. I also wanted to explain there is a new process for OINP in 2017. So in 2017, the federal government has allocated 6,000 spots for Ontario government. So the Ontario government can nominate 6,000 people who they want to have permanent residence in 2017. That is not necessarily a lot, given that there's many people who are applying. So there's 2,500 allocated just for express entry nominations. That's not the program that we're talking about today. And 3,500 for all of these other categories, including the program that we're talking about today. Okay? And this also includes applications that had been sitting from last year as well. So, 6,000 spots, it's not a whole lot of nomination spots, but the Ontario government has been coming out with some good new programs. And so far, for the program that we're talking about today, it's still open. You can still apply for that program. So everything now with Ontario is going to be online. And so all of the documents are submitted online. And we're going to talk about this more later on. But basically, we have a limited time. Once we've created a profile for someone, we have only 21 days to submit all of the documents for the application. Okay, with the online system, it's not the computer does not necessarily check whether or not you qualify. It's still evaluated by officer. You can just submit documents. So you must make sure that everything that you submit is perfect, otherwise it will be refused. There's also a situation where the government is now pausing programs. So this year they've paused the master's program 2 times. They've also paused the employer-based program once before, and then the employer-based program opened afterwards again. So it's basically a first come, first serve. If you have put in your profile before it closed, before it's paused, then you can submit your application. But when enough applicants have submitted their application, the government will close it, so you cannot submit another application until they open it again. Whether or not they'll open it a second time or third time in Ontario, nobody really knows. But the main point is that you want to make sure that you're going to submit it when your program is open. So it's not that the entire OINP closes, it's just individual programs close when the government feels like they have enough applications under that program. So this is, it depends on the category. Some categories, such as the master's program, have been paused after just 2 days after it's been opened. Other programs have remained open throughout this year. Okay, so I want to talk first about the employer-based categories. The category we're talking about today, the InDemand Skills Pilot Program for farm workers and construction workers, is an employer-based category. What does that mean? Well, it means that you have to have a job offer from a qualified employer. So who qualifies to be the employer? Okay, there's some criteria. If the employer is in the GTA, then their gross income last year has to be over 1 million. They have to have over 5 full-time employees who are Canadians or permanent residents, and they have to be in business for over 3 years. If the job offers from an employer outside of the GTA, they have to have a gross income last year of over 500,000. They have to have over 3 full-time employees who are Canadian or permanent resident, and they have to be in Canada. Be in business for over 3 years. Okay, so first of all, if you have a job offer, you have to see if your employer qualifies for it. Now, this is for all of the employer-based categories. Now, here are some of the rules for the InDemand Skills Pilot program that we're talking about today. One of the main things is that it has to fall under one of the eligible occupations. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more in detail afterwards. But each applicant has to have a job offer and 1 out of 3 years of work experience in Ontario in one of the following occupations. So for farm and food workers, we have general farm workers, and I'm putting the NOC code at the end of it. Don't worry if you don't know what the NOC code means. NOC codes are essentially the government's classification codes for the different occupations. So when someone comes to us, we have to figure out whether or not they fall into one of these occupations in order to, that's listed by the government in the description. It can't just be, you call them a general farm worker, but they're actually a cook, right? They have to actually meet the criteria and have the job duties of a general farm worker. Okay, so general farm workers are there, nursery and greenhouse workers, harvesting laborers, and also industrial butchers, meat cutters, poultry preparers, related workers. So these are the butchers and the meat packing. This is all done in the factories. Okay. Then we also have construction workers. Now, construction workers, why I keep saying low skilled, it's not that I think construction workers are actually, under these categories, are actually low skilled. This is what the government has deemed these occupations to be low skilled. And the very important thing about this is construction workers who are in the high skilled categories already have pathways to permanent residence. For the first time in Ontario, the Ontario government is actually allowing construction workers who fall under the low skilled categories to actually apply for permanent residence, okay? And so heavy equipment operators, like forklift drivers, okay? Crane operators are already high skilled, so we don't, this is not, doesn't pertain to them, but other heavy equipment operators may fall under the low skilled category, and now they are also able to immigrate. Then we have the residential commercial installers and servicers. We have the laborers and trades helpers. So these are people who are helping the drywall, helping the bricklayer, but they're not actually doing the bricklayers. They're carrying materials to them. Now they are also able to immigrate under this category. Now, there's a lot more criteria as well. And so here we go. First of all, they have to have a job offer. Okay, if you don't have a job offer, you have to find one that meets the criteria in order to qualify for this. So the job offer has to be a permanent job offer. Permanent means that you don't have an end to your contract. It's not say I'm going to hire John for 2 years. Okay, permanent means that I'm going to hire you as my employee. There's no end. Doesn't mean that they can't fire you. It's just that there's no set end in the contract. It's in one of the designated occupations we just talked about. It has to be a full-time job. Full-time is defined as 30 hours a week. So, so it has to be at least 30 hours or more a week. And the Ontario government is saying non-seasonal. So I know this, a lot of people who work with farm workers are going to say, well, how's this going to work? We raised the same issue with the Ontario government in a briefing that we had just a few days ago. And the Ontario government actually did say that, say you have a farm harvesting laborer, farm worker who is here 8 months of the year, but there's no vegetables to harvest afterwards. Well, if they were able to, the farmer was willing to hire them to do other work during the off-season period. For example, they're fixing up the greenhouse, or so it doesn't even have to fall exactly under that occupation. That could still work as long as the majority of the work is in one of the designated occupations. The salary also must meet median wage, and that's we look at the government surveys for each occupation. Now, if they have LMIAs, they should already meet median wage. So I'm not too worried about that if they have an LMIA work permit. Okay. So that's a job offer. Then the applicant also has to meet criteria. So first of all, they have to have work experience. They have to have at least, so we're calculating 30 hours a week times 52. Okay, 1,560 hours. And one of those designated occupations that I've talked about before in the past, for 1 year in the past 3 years. Okay, so it doesn't have to be consecutive. It doesn't mean that you can't have a break in between. So if you had seasonal agriculture workers who are working here 8 months in 1 year, and then afterwards they worked another 4 months or 8 months next year, they would qualify for that. Okay? If they have, so this one probably pertains mostly to the heavy equipment operators. So the heavy equipment operators, if they need licensing, then they have to already have the licensing in order to qualify. They also have to take an English exam. I'm assuming most of you, they don't know French. If they know French, they can also take a French exam, okay? So for the English, we're looking at IELTS or CELPIP. For the French, we're looking at TEF. And the benchmark of 4 is not extremely high, but it does require them to have at least, when I say what is deemed basic is still to be able to have conversations in English, in English or French. When they read or write, they still need to write proper sentences and be able to understand a certain level. Okay, if they can't communicate with English or French, then we're going to be in trouble. Okay, they also have to have a high school diploma. If they are high school diplomas outside of Canada, we need what is called an ECA. So the ECA is a third party, like we usually recommend WES, W-E-S, because they seem to be the fastest, but there's a few other organizations as well who they need to have transcripts sent directly to the organization from the school and for them to evaluate it to make sure that it's the same as a high school degree in diploma in Canada. They can also get GCAs, GEDs, or the high school equivalency in Ontario as well to meet that, okay? They also need it depends on their salary. So for one person, normally, we need $12,300 for settlement funds. For each additional family member, you're going to add a couple thousand or so more, okay? If their salary is enough, yearly salary is enough to cover that, then they don't need to have any more savings. If not, then they're going to have enough savings in order to make sure that their family it meets the LICO standard, which is what the government deems is required for a person to live in Canada for 1 year, okay? And finally, they need to have legal status in Canada, so they can't be out of status in Canada, or else if they are out of status, they would qualify if they left Canada, okay? Refugee claimants, if they are in Canada, are not eligible for it, whether or not they've been refused or they haven't had their hearing yet, okay? If they left Canada, then yes, they could qualify for this. Now, let me just go through a little bit more about the process of how to apply for this. So first, after we evaluate and make sure someone qualifies for this, we need to create a profile online before the program closes. So we need to create a profile ASAP. Once you create a profile, we have to submit the application within 21 days. So it's not a very long period of time at all. Within 3 weeks, you have to submit a complete application. Okay? The nice thing now is that in the beginning, the employer is not required to submit their own corporate documents. But later on, the officer will likely ask them to supplement more documents, and they have to have them available then. The employer needs to sign an attestation and application form stating that they meet all the criteria and they are offering the job to the applicant. And the applicants then, we need to submit all of the other documents to prove their background, to prove that they satisfy the requirements that we just talked about. And that's all submitted within 21 days of us creating an online profile. So basically, we want to submit the profile as soon as possible to keep the door open, but we need to be ready to go as soon as we need to be basically almost there, ready to go as soon, and make sure that they qualify as soon as profile is created. So once a person has the, it's approved under the OINP, okay, there's two things that they now qualify for. They can apply, first of all, for permanent residence with the federal government, and really all the federal government is reviewing is admissibility. So whether or not they have a criminal record, have any medical issues, whether or not they've overstayed, they have status in Canada or not, that is the federal government. But everything else, all the other eligibility has been assessed by Ontario. They can also, while they are waiting for their permanent residence, which may take around a year or so, they can also apply for a work permit as well without an LMIA. They are required under the work permit to work for that employer. And then once they get permanent residence, they can do whatever they like. But under the work permit, for the OINP work permit, the provincial nomination work permit, they do have to work for that employer who's offered them that job. So we've talked now a lot about the application. Let me just take a step back and say, okay, why should someone think about applying under this category, right? Well, there's a lot of benefits for this category. First of all, they can actually apply for permanent residence now. And this is for people who are under these occupations really in Ontario, and also for the federal government. This is really the first time they can actually apply for permanent residence. The only other ways we have been trying to do it is through the HNC, humanitarian compassionate grounds, but that's very, very high discretion, and they often are refused. Under this category, if you qualify, you qualify. And there's the officers who evaluate this, they can't say, well, I don't really think this case has merit and this person deserves to immigrate. No, if that person satisfies all of the criteria, they have to issue it. Okay, so the discretionary power is a lot less, which makes this application much more beneficial. Secondly, there's no advertising requirement for the employer. We can get a work permit after the OINP is approved without advertising. And now the OINPs are taking much shorter time this year. For other categories, we've had many of them evaluated and approved within a couple of months. So, it's a lot less hassle for the employer to undergo this way rather than having to go through the advertising requirements for a LMIA, for example, okay? And we can get a work permit while waiting for the permanent residence. So what should you do now? Now, we have some individuals online. We also have a lot of community service workers here as well. I would be pleased to discuss any of next steps with anyone, individuals, but also particularly community workers who we can talk about offline as to how we might be able to help en masse people that you help as well. But really, first of all, the steps to go through this is we really need to first evaluate to see if this is the right choice for you. And then the strategy is to submit the profile as soon as possible. Possible does not necessarily mean the next day. We do need to make sure that all the documents are available at least to gather within 3 weeks, okay? And finally, we have to make sure that the application is perfect. If you're missing one item on the list or one a piece of information that is incorrect, that entire application will be refused. And given the fact that this is really a first come, first serve situation, if you lose your place in line, you could basically be out of the line for the next year or so, okay? So anyway, I'm gonna leave up here my consultation, our information. I would, for individuals, I would highly recommend a consultation where we sit down with you for half an hour to an hour to go over your situation, make sure either you qualify for this or see if there's anything else we can do for you. And for service workers, community service workers, we would certainly be happy to do more seminars for your organizations and to discuss with you other ways we can help out. So in the meantime, Zia, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so do you have some questions for me?
I do. So the first question I have for you, Elizabeth, is how does the employer submit documents? So you talked about needing an employer form and potentially other documents afterwards. How does that get to be a part of the application?
Right. So in the beginning, when we are submitting, within that 21 days, when we submit the documents, we don't actually have to submit the documents for the employers other than the forms and the attestations. Afterwards, the government, so for some large employers who the government, for example, if it was a bank or if it was a huge manufacturing facility that's been in Ontario for years and years, right? The government knows that they qualify. They have to satisfy those 3 criteria, the gross income, the number of employees, and number of years in business. Some employers may never be required to submit further documents. But for most small to medium-sized companies, the government may follow up and say, we want you to provide us with these documents. Normally what we do in the beginning, even though we don't submit documents, is we might ask to see some of the documents from the employers to make sure that that's available if the government requests them, okay? And so that would be after the application is submitted, the employer might get a request from the government to submit more documents.
Perfect. Okay, and the next question that I have is, do you have to be inside of Ontario in order to qualify?
You do not have to be inside Ontario. The work experience that the worker has gleaned, so that it's the 1 year within the 3 years, has to be within Ontario. But they can absolutely apply outside of Ontario. So for example, if last year they worked for 1 year and now they're back in Mexico, well, we can absolutely still submit the application on their behalf.
Okay. Can you go over the definition or what the job offer has to be? So what do you mean by permanent job offer?
So I've outlined previously, and by the way, this webinar will be online. It will be on our website, lmlawgroup.com /videos, I think. And you can view this again at your leisure. But the criteria, like I said, for the job offer, the permanent job offer, etc., that's all outlined in the employment contract. And we'll need to see that employment contract as well and submit that. Yeah.
Perfect. What about work experience? So let's talk a little bit about work experience. The work experience, does it have to be within the same occupation that you're applying for? And if it's work experience that was gained during apprenticeship programs, does that qualify?
So the work experience has to be in one occupation for that 1 out of 3 years. And the work experience has to be Ontario. It has to be paid. If it's apprenticeship and it was paid and they qualified and they had all the licensing to do that, then that's okay. But if it wasn't paid, if it was volunteer work, then or an internship that wasn't paid, we can't count that.
Perfect. What if an individual is working in a different position right now, but they have 1 year of work experience in a particular occupation that they have a permanent job offer for? Are they eligible to apply?
Yes. So if they are, for example, in Mexico doing carpentry, but they were a seasonal agriculture worker here in Canada right now, they could apply as long as that job offer is in that occupation. So they can't say, well, I have a job offer for a carpenter. If it's in that case, we put them in a completely different category. That job offer has to be for them to come back and work as one of the farm workers in one of their occupations.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all the questions that we have.
Fantastic. So Zia, will you be staying online for a little while longer to answer any further questions?
Yes, I'll be right here.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you guys. It was great. While I didn't get a chance to talk to you personally, I'll be happy to talk to you personally afterwards as well. Take care.